Serious, what is the most paranormal or unexplainable event or events you have witnessed? One day I was with my friends and suddenly my head started getting heavy and my vision began to white out at the point where I couldn't see anything at all. I immediately thought that someone cold drugged me and asked my friends to help me walk to a place where I could get some air and sit down. My sight was coming back, but I couldn't speak or express anything, couldn't respond or answer what my friends were asking. Somehow I got into a trance, and it felt like I was seeing my surroundings from an above me perspective. My friend called my mom and she picked me up. I still couldn't respond until I got home and went to the bathroom. 3 days later my mom received a call from my grandpa and I immediately knew what was going on. He told her that my dad had passed away and was found dead in his bathroom. I live with my mom and my dad used to live in other state. The forensic report showed that he died in that exact date and probably around the moment I've had that episode. On the day my father died I was alone in the apartment we lived in while everyone was out mourning at my uncle's. I stayed home because I didn't want people to stare at me sobbing. Anyways, I'm in the living room and I hear footsteps in my mother's room that has a balcony. I straight up hear the balcony door open, so now I'm like sobbing and shouting asking who's there. I go check it out and there's no one there except a strong smell of tobacco in the room. My father used to smoke on the balcony. Never told anyone about it and just kept it for myself. Later learned my mother got blamed for my dad's death, even though they loved each other since they were teens, and my dad was simply a victim of cancer, and a massive brawl broke out. So I just thought of it as my dad coming home because he couldn't be bothered to hear people arguing. I have one. It must have been some kind of hallucination, but it really scared me. I was sitting in my bed watching YouTube for a couple hours. I got up and reached forward to set something on my nightstand or whatever. I had this strange undescribable feeling that I hadn't actually moved from where I was sitting at all. I quickly turned around and looked at where I was sitting seconds before, and there I was, still sitting there. I was outside my body. I could see the shocked, horrified expression come to my face at such a strange sight. I quickly sat back down right in the same spot and nothing strange happened again. I know you weren't sleeping, but this reminded me of the strangest dream. I floated out of my body and onto a floating pillow, and I could see myself sleeping on my bed. I rode the pillow down the hall of my house and into the living room, and my one dog was laying on the back of the couch and the other was on the rug. I floated back to my body and I woke up. Curious, I went into the living room and my dogs were in those very same spots. I'll bring out this story again. It happened to me 7 years ago, and I can't figure it out, but I lost an hour of time in what felt to me like minutes. At the time I was working from home after a serious illness diagnosis. I had settled into a routine, up at 7 AM, and do house stuff and shower, then at 8 AM start prepping my work, and laying out my day. Phone calls and emails from 8 to 9. This is all I remember. It was 7:55, and I brewed a cup of Keurig coffee on my kitchen located on the main floor of my house. I went upstairs to my office and turned on my computer to settle in and realized I forgot the coffee in the kitchen. I went back downstairs and got the coffee. As soon as I realized I forgot it, couldn't have been more than the time it took Windows to boot up, but I took a sip and the coffee was cold. Not warm, but actually cold. I thought my Keurig was broke, but I looked at the clock and it said 9:14. So whereas I expected it to be 8:05 maximum, somehow an hour and 10 minutes passed without explanation. It was very bothersome. I have no idea where that hour went. I have never had any blackout before or since. No seizures, and the meds I was on shouldn't have caused a lapse like that. I don't think I fell asleep because I distinctly remember typing my password and saying out loud, shit, I forgot the coffee. It kinda left me uneasy a bit. Nothing like had ever happened to me before or since. I was in my laundry room and I heard someone come up behind me, and I swear they whispered. I screamed so loud and thought it was my husband playing a prank on me. When I turned around no one was there, and it was so freaky. Also, when I was a teenager I was sitting in my room at my computer desk, and piece of paper and pen went up in the air and slammed back down. I ran downstairs to tell my mom, and I was crying hysterically. My mom thinks I just hallucinated it. I work in a prison. Before my job in the jail changed, I used to have about 1.5 hours of downtime before it was time to punch out. My sergeant at the time asked if I would cover the 11 PM count on one of the blocks. He didn't care what I did before or after, just do the count. No prob. I'm sitting at our Times Square area. One hallway leads to 4 blocks, and another hallway leads to the other 4. I'm sitting in front of one of those hallways. I hear someone walking towards me from behind. But I realize I don't hear keys. We all have keys, except inmates. I turn around. No one there. I think, okay, maybe I just imagined it. Guy sitting in the area with me asks who it was. I guess I didn't imagine it. Alright then. 11 PM comes. I go to the block. No one is letting me in. WTF. I go back to the Times Square area to call and let the officer know not to panic. I'm coming. I just can't get in. As I'm on the phone, I feel someone behind me and they lean into my ear and whisper forcefully, "What are you doing?" I wave my hand back to signal to them to stop. I hang up and turn to yell at who it was. No one is there. No one is in any hallway. I'm all alone. We have so many stories from this fucking place. But your story reminded me of the second part of mine, so I had to tell it. Did Control see anything on the cameras? That was prior to cameras in that area. Plus even now, aside from RSU and MHU, solitary and mental health, respectively, the cameras don't record 24/7, nor do they have audio. Or so we've been told. But, now that you bring it up, we did have an officer in the MHU control room see a shadow person on camera. There's a hallway. On one side there is a door with no windows that you have to be buzzed into. This leads down to MHU. Across the hall, and about a foot over, there is a door with a big window on the top half. That door leads to our disciplinary area. There are a few office doors and hearing rooms in the hallway, and it opens up to a big desk area, and there's another locked door leading into the disciplinary office. Anyway, if you're in MHU, you have cameras on all 8 inmates, a camera to the door leading to the stairs/elevator, and a camera that shows you the upstairs where the elevator and stairs land, and then the outside of the door you get buzzed into. So, one midnight shift, dude looked up at the cameras and noticed movement in the window of the disciplinary door. Not entirely weird, since there's a sergeant office in there. But Central gave him no trip calls that a higher up was in their area. He called to double check, and no. So, no one should be in there. He's still watching, and can see the shadow standing there. Then it moves away, comes back, but it's more to the side, like trying to look down the hall without opening the door. And this goes on for a few minutes. The other officer he's with sees it too. So, in order to rule out anything, they get the roundsman to check it out. No one is in there. Fun fact, our disciplinary area used to be our infirmary. Quite a few inmates died there, and a lot were victims of HIV-related complications. We used to have a lieutenant who, on his first midnight shift as our watch commander, so making rounds alone in the middle of the night, heard moaning and groaning coming from there. As soon as he stepped into the area, he felt like something was in there who was going to hurt him, and after making sure no one was there, he hauled ass out of there. He refused to go in there ever again. If he had disciplinary during the day, he made sure to never be alone in the offices. After my dad passed away, my stepmom kept asking me if I found the book he was reading in his last month or months. She didn't know the title. We looked all over the house for it. Eventually found it with a stack of magazines. Definitely not where it belonged in the house. My stepmom recognized it immediately when found. The title of the book was Hello from Heaven. I also received a phone call 2 days after he passed away. The phone call was from his phone number. For some reason I was too scared to answer. Asked the only person who had the phone, stepmom, if she had called from it. She said she left it in the garage where he always worked. This was 14 years ago. I still regret not answering the phone. Regret? A call from a dead person? No thanks, I'll pass. About 5 years ago my husband and I went to visit his grandma. Big, beautiful 2-story house. I was going to head upstairs to put some pajamas on and saw a woman walk across the top of the stairs. It was only my husband, young daughter and his grandma in the house, and whoever I saw wasn't Granny. I went in the living room and told them what I saw, and his grandma goes, "Yeah, that's Lori. She visits a lot. Lori was my husband's mom who had died when he was 11. I was so fucking spooked after that I barely slept the rest of the time we were there. Grandma is so causal about it. Lol. Elderly people can be surprisingly chill about ghosts. My aunt's mother has one she calls George. Every few nights he stops by to brush his teeth in her bathroom. She hears water running, brushing, some gurgling, and then he's gone. After my mother died I went to her grave a few times a week. I usually had my kids with me, and this one day as we passed all the older cemeteries my eldest son who was 6 at the time asked Mom, "What are all those people waiting for? Why are they just standing there?" The cemetery was empty, and not a single human was there. When we got to my mom's grave he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Grandma is with Mom and they are happy." Mom was my mother's sister who passed away before my husband and I were even married. My son knew nothing of her, or what we called her. He also would tell us when someone had died in a house. When I was a kid I said weird stuff like this. Once I was at a bonfire staring into the sky. When my mom asked what I was looking at I said the ladder from heaven is coming down for the lady down the road. My mom laughed it off then, but that night the lady down the road died. My mom was shocked. I also had a dream about my great-great-grandmother. I told my great-grandma, and that she loved her. My great-grandma asked me to describe her, and I did perfectly, and even picked her out of a photo album. Finally, right after my other grandma died, I was walking down the stairs of her house when I saw her in the corner. I remember this vividly because I wasn't very close to this grandma, and I was so freaked out, but it was like I was in a trance. I ended up falling down the stairs. It makes me wonder, because she didn't like my sister and me very much, haha. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange man's voice. I couldn't understand what he was saying, because he was talking really fast, but at one point I heard it say my brother's name, and then it started laughing maniacally. My dad heard it too, and came running into my room, and turned the lights on. No one was there. Absolutely no explanation. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I heard what sounded like a cult gathering right outside my window. It was like 3 AM and I could just very clearly hear a group of people singing/chanting, while a baby wailed. After about 10 to 20 minutes, it suddenly stopped. The laughing maniacally bit got to me. Jesus. Did you ever hear this guy again? I did not. If I ever do, I'll have to just burn the whole house down. I used to get these weird audio hallucinations as a kid when trying to fall asleep. A faint radio/TV talk show with several people going back and forth. I could tell that it was people talking, but couldn't make out any of the words. It was also just barely audible. It would only happen when there was absolute silence, and if I turned my head a couple of times it would go away for a bit. Went away as I got older. It didn't worry me that much, because I had seen people on the internet talking about the same thing. I read several theories. Like sometimes, if your house is close to a radio station, the wiring in your house and your appliances will sometimes actually vibrate in a way that plays the signals back. But there were no nearby radio stations, plus a lively talk show wouldn't be on at 1 AM. The other one I read is that your brain will sometimes create audio stimuli when there is absolute silence. However, I haven't seen a lot of concrete evidence for this, i.e. a study, just random websites talking about it. Mine's not crazy scary, but it is true. I was in the living room with my grandma. We were the only ones home. She was working on a crossword puzzle, and I was messing around on my iPad. TV was off, windows were closed. All of a sudden, clear as day, I hear my name being whispered, but since it was so quiet it sounded loud. I looked up to my grandma, thinking it was her asking her if she said something. She said no, but I heard your name. This is the creepiest one I have read so far. It reminds me of the story where the girl hears the mom calling her name, but then the real mom pulls her into a closet or something like that saying I heard it too. Or this one, I begin tucking him into bed, and he tells me, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." I look underneath for his amusement and see him, another him, under the bed, staring back at me, quivering and whispering, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed." Well, fuck this shit. My stepdad found our puppy Eddie on the side of the road. Someone had thrown him out of a moving car, and he had broken legs, broken teeth, a swollen and closed eye, and was severely dehydrated. My stepdad took him to the vet and paid quite a bit of money for surgeries to get Eddie fixed up. He got attached to the doggo, so we ended up adopting him. After that, even though he was the family dog, he was best buds with my stepdad. Anywhere my stepdad was around the house, you could find Ed tagging along. Eddie and I grew up together. He died while I was in college, and my parents buried him in a pet cemetery. Since it was sort of sudden, and I was far away, I didn't get to say goodbye. A few months after that, I had a dream where Eddie comes and find me. His hair is matted and dirty, and his flesh looks kind of rotted, but he's wagging his tail and seems really happy to see me again. Eddie starts leading me down a hazy path, and the farther we go, the faster his tail wags. Finally, we get to this giant wall of mist that extends across the entire horizon and rises higher than I can see. Eddie gets real close to it before trotting back to me. He licks my hand, gives me a couple of nose boots and whines a little. Then he turns around again and starts to do that happy dog prance toward the wall until he finally passes through it. I can sort of see his outline jumping up and down excitedly next to a human-shaped figure. I jog after Eddie and reach my hand out to touch the wall, hoping I'll be able to pass through it too. That's when my cell phone rings in real life, waking me up. When I answer it, my mom is on the other end crying. My stepdad had just died of a heart attack. A few years ago, about a year after we moved into our house, my mom and I were home alone with our dog. I was in one bedroom and my mom was in another right across the hall. I heard my dog's toy squeaking down at the end of the hall, so I figured she was playing with it, no big deal. Then my dog came running into the bedroom, without a toy, but the squeaking continued. My dog was running around like crazy, in and out of the bedrooms, as if she was trying to figure out where the squeaking was coming from. I figured my mom was teasing her, trying to get her to play. It continued for a few minutes and my dog was getting crazier and crazier, until my mom called across the hall for me to stop squeaking the damn toy, you're making the dog crazy. So I stepped into the hallway and said, I don't have the toy, I thought you were squeaking it. At this point the squeaking had stopped, and we were both freaked out, standing right next to each other with the dog sitting between us. We looked down the hallway and the toy was sitting there, nothing touching it. Suddenly it started squeaking like crazy, as if someone were jumping up and down on it. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I was frozen in place. My mom almost started crying. The energy was just so weird, I can't even explain it. Turns out the previous owners had a dog that died in the house, and they told my parents that the ghost of the dog comes around from time to time. Now, I've always been iffy about the existence of ghosts, but I swear that ghost dog was playing with my dog's toy. Terrifying, but also sort of adorable. Just a good boy that wanted to play. Unsure if it's a haunted house or more of something becoming attached to me. Not long after I met my current boyfriend I would spend the night at his house. Normally I fall asleep as soon as I hit the pillow, but at his house I would be awake super late feeling creeped out. I blamed it on being in a strange house. After a while I used to fall asleep at a decent time, but I would wake up 2 to 3 AM and try to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Small town equals very little light pollution. Once I would adjust I felt like I could see a little boy on top of the grandfather clock. This would happen every night for a while. I never felt scared, just confused. It looked like a boy wearing older style pajamas kicking his legs on top of the clock. Still I would blame it on sleep paralysis / dreaming or my imagination. When I would go back to my parents' house for the school nights I would start waking up in the middle of the night seeing the same apparition sitting on the dresser or ledge in my room. I slept alone in the basement of the house. After months of seeing the "little boy" I wanted to sleep upstairs again as I figured my mind was just getting to me. One evening I was home alone as my brother and parents were gone to some appointment. I happened to fall asleep on the couch in the living room only to dream that the little boy was knocking down my mom's ornaments that were on the coffee table. I woke up in a cold sweat and looked at the table. Sure enough the ornaments were broken. Of course they could have been broken beforehand, and I never noticed. It started to get chilly in the living room, So I moved to my mother's bedroom to watch TV. Before they came home in her bedroom, I kept seeing stuff out of the corner of my eye that looked like the little boy, but never really had a full-on view. At this point I was sure it wasn't sleep paralysis / dreaming, because I could move when I woke up and sometimes I would be wide awake. I fell asleep in my mom's bed and woke up to the little boy laughing and running in the closet. Friday of that week I went to my boyfriend's house and he knew something was up, but I wouldn't tell him out of fear that he would think I was crazy. That night I was helping his mom bake, and I happened to mention that I was having really weird dreams about a little boy, and she asked me if he was a young one with his jammies on. She knew what I was talking about. She told me that their house was pretty old and all throughout the time they lived there strange stuff would happen, such as stuff being moved or hearing voices or laughter, but the past 6 to 8 months things had stopped happening. It's been 3 years and I've moved out with my boyfriend to start post-secondary. Still seeing / sensing / dealing with whatever it is. Things being moved / voices. I used to live in a town that was pretty strange altogether, but the house was even more so. Most of my elder family that grew up there had also had weird experiences. I remember one time I got up to use the toilet. The bathroom was next door, which was across the way from my bedroom, and I shit you not, a woman in a full vintage nurse's outfit came running out of the bathroom with a washcloth and into my bedroom. I have no idea if there used to be a poorly person accommodating it years ago, but the house was very old. That is the good side of it though. There's a lot more. You'd even sit there sometimes and have this awful feeling of a bad presence. As if somebody was staring at you, eyes burning into your soul kind of feeling, you know? Freaky stuff. The house my mom grew up in has that awful feeling. I don't feel this way about any other house I've ever been in, but that is just fucking creepy. I have no idea what it is about it, but yeah, it just feels bad. It's also strange, because that is how everyone feels when they go inside it. My aunt bought the house from my mom and their other siblings after my grandma died, and they all inherited it. My aunt's husband is a contractor, so their plan was to remodel the house, then sell it. They completely renovated the house, even though it wasn't in bad shape, and got new everything from paint to floors, cabinets, you name it. Even after all that, it still made everyone uncomfortable when inside the house. They had the house up for sale for over 5 years and wasn't able to sell it. I firmly believe it didn't sell because of that shitty / creepy feeling you get when going in there. I believe in good and bad energy. A house would contain energy based on people that have lived and died there. I found the house I grew up in had a lot of bad energy due to the death of both my parents and my grandmother. I always felt like nothing good can happen to you unless you left that house. I moved out at 21, and even though I had nothing when I left, I managed to work myself up and found a better life. My sil bought a house a few years ago, and when I walked in I sensed an energy in that house. It was old, built by the last owners. Husband died and wife moved away due to old age. I sensed that the husband would not want many changes, and that the house will never be a source of happiness for my sil, who was so excited for her first fixer-upper. It has been 4 years and it's been nothing but a money pit. Her family life has been suffering. Her oldest child suffers from anxiety. Her husband has to work in a different country just to make ends meet and pay for mortgage and rent. To us, it just looks like it's gone downhill since she bought that house. I always remind my husband about the energy. We had a rental house with a ghost in it. Wasn't a bad ghost. He smelled like marijuana a bit, and he would come sit on the bed. Multiple tenants reported seeing the same thing. Sounds like a pretty chill guy. When I was in high school, my younger brother and I shared a bedroom. His bed was on one side of the room and mine was on the other. My brother was an avid sleepwalker and would also talk in his sleep all of the time. Sharing a bedroom with him, it was unsettling at first, but I eventually got used to it. One night, it's about 3 AM and I suddenly wake up from a deep sleep, instantly alert. I had this urge to look towards my brother's bed. I felt a presence in the room. When I turned my head, I saw a tall, skinny shadow / human-like figure, and it was reaching its hand down towards my sleeping brother's face. Its hand got maybe an inch away before its head jerked to the side and looked at me, staring at it, frozen. The shadow then faded and moved up into the air, vanishing through the ceiling. Immediately, my brother shot up out of his bed, stood, and walked to the light switch. He turned it on, and looked at me. In a very calm and solemn voice, he says, "Did you feel it? Did you feel the hand?" He then turned off the light, and went back to his bed. I hid under my covers the rest of the night. My brother doesn't remember any of it. I was 10 years old. It was a Sunday morning, between 11 AM to 12 PM. My mother was in the kitchen preparing lunch. As she was washing the Vegas, the water pressure from the tap started to fluctuate. Water would flow, stop flowing, like someone was playing around with the tap. My mom asked out aloud on who's messing with the water pressure. The valve for the water tank was just outside my house, and my dad went to inspect it, and I followed him. Nothing was out of place. As we walked back into the house, we saw before our very eyes bloody chicken claw prints emerge one by one. It's like a chicken with bloodied feet walked through the hall, except there was no chicken. Freaked me the fuck out, but we were just stunned and stood there staring as one footprint emerged after another. There were about 5 or 6 claw prints in all before it stopped. Everyone in my family saw it. We didn't discuss it immediately. My parents just wiped the claw prints off. What made this event worse was the fact that it occurred during a very turbulent period in my household. My mom had schizophrenia, but at that point she wasn't diagnosed yet. She heard voices in her head, hostile voices, and was convinced that there was a grand conspiracy against her, and people were planning to kidnap me and my sister. She didn't trust my father, her mother and her siblings. So when something legitimately paranormal happens, it just fucks everything up. Like in a world where bloody chicken prints appear, why wouldn't there be some occult conspiracy? Those few months were the most traumatic of my childhood. My mom was admitted into a psychiatric facility a few weeks later, after being diagnosed with schizophrenia. But dealing with her paranoia and violent outbursts against everyone, not her children, broke my world. Part of me even believed her. Having some legit paranormal shit happening in the middle of the day didn't help at all. 17 years on, she is still on medication, but she is stable and fully functional. Even when she was going through the worst of her schizophrenic episodes, she was never neglectful. Always loving towards her children, always dutiful. But she was overprotective during those times. I was afraid that I'd get schizophrenia because it is somewhat hereditary. My mom's sister became quite unstable a couple of years ago. To complete the double jeopardy of insanity, my dad's sister also had paranoia and her son was admitted for a manic episode. So this propensity for psychotic disorders on both sides of the family tree has made me pretty resolute on not getting married and having kids. Sorry that this post has veered from bloody chicken prints to me or floating about schizophrenia. I never told any friend or GF about it, so I guess I just took this as a chance to vent. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that bell to turn on notifications, so you'll be sure to know when the next video comes out. Want to watch some more? Check out my other videos. I really do appreciate everyone who helps make these videos possible. And as always, thanks for watching.